Today on the show, we do the very first edition ever of the Ask Brady Show. Well, hey there, and welcome to the very first episode of Ask Brady, a brand new video format, video series that we're doing here at Pro Church Tools, where you, Pro Church Nation, submit your questions and I answer them in this medium to long form style video. I'm not alone though. I am joined by a member of the Pro Church Tools team, Roxanne.
Hello.
Roxanne is the director of member success here, meaning when you have a problem, she has the solution. And Roxanne is also going to be the one who's gathering the questions and helping me answer them. So basically, we've for this first episode, we've got 4 questions already submitted, and I don't know how many we're going to do. 3, 4, 5 each show.
Yeah, probably around there.
Somewhere in that 3, 4, 5-ish. Like I said, we already have 4 questions submitted, and we have a bunch, right? In a note. Yeah, okay. So we have a bunch already. But if you want to get your question answered, the easiest way to do so is to go on to Instagram and or Twitter and use the hashtag AskBrady. The great thing about my ridiculous name is that we don't have to put my last name into the hashtag because nobody's named Brady. So we can have a monopoly on the Ask Brady hashtag.
Yep.
Take that, everyone named Don, Charles, Barry. Okay, apparently everyone I'm saying is named really old names. Yo, this always happens though, right?
Barry.
When you're doing Ask Barry. No one would. But this always happens. Whenever I come up with a name, I always come up with the name of my parents' generation. I don't say Jonas or Tristan.
Yeah.
I say Charles, Barry, and Carl.
I think it's a cultural thing though, because in our generation, it's all half made up names. My sister's name Allison with weird letters thrown in.
That reminds me of the Mean Girls clip when you have the principal and she's like, and he named his kid Anthony. Almost as much as I hate him for naming his kid Anthony.
I have a nephew named Anthony, and I know how mad he gets when I call him Anthony. Almost as mad as I get when I think about the fact that my sister named him Anthony.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic. Okay, so like I said, we have a monopoly on the Ask Brady hashtag. So if you want to get your question answered, just go to Twitter or Instagram, use the hashtag AskBrady. You can also comment right below this video on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll be monitoring the comments. Still, make sure you use that hashtag AskBrady so we know that's a question that you want to be submitted on the show. So with all that being said, let's dive into the first question.
So the first question is from Andrew, and he says, Andrew asks, who, if anyone, should your church Twitter account follow?
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to respond to Andrew's question, not just in the scope of who to follow or not follow on Twitter, but we'll also talk about Instagram as well, because for most churches, the polls that we've seen, a lot of churches aren't on Twitter, at least with an ultra active presence. But churches are huge on Instagram. Usually a church's social presence goes number 1, Facebook, number 2, Instagram. So let's talk about who you should follow on Instagram, if anyone. Now, the first thing I want to say about this is that if you are a super popular church, you likely don't have to follow anyone. And the problem with that is that our smaller churches, if you're the average church in North America, anywhere between 150 and 300, you're looking to a big church and you're like, man, we don't have to follow anyone because once we get to their stage, and we all have the aspirations to get to a certain stage, and we kind of imagine that we will, what we're going to begin doing is using the social media strategy that someone has at this level when we're over here at this level. So let's first remove any stigma that following people is somehow considered less or not good. Following people from your church's account is a good thing. What you don't want to do is be that church account or that business account that follows individuals unprompted, and then you're like, why is Tom's Insurance following me? Like that, you just know, you're like, Tom's Insurance doesn't care about me. So here's what I would suggest for following strategy. Number 1, only follow people on your social accounts that are in some way engaged with your church. This could mean that they go to your church or this could mean that they're connected with you online, but engaged in some way. Another easy strategy to consider is to always follow everyone back, assuming that they are engaged with your church in some way. There's a lot of spam accounts, a lot of inappropriate accounts that you don't want to follow back because that can, look poor on you as the church. But make sure that you follow back people, especially if you see them and you recognize them and know they're engaged with your church. If you're not sure if they're engaged, what you can do is you can just go to their profile. And for most of us, we don't have like dozens of requests every day, so we can still do this on an individual level. Go to the person's profile who just followed you. And you can see, like, usually you can see on someone's profile, they post a Bible verse or like they, link something. You're like, oh, okay, this person is connected in a faith way, or maybe they're connected in your local region. And that leads me to the third consideration for who you should follow. If you are a church account, and this also works for if you're a pastor account, but especially if you're a church account. One thing that you can do preemptively for a follow strategy is follow other businesses and other organizations, other professionals in your region. So for instance, we have a Mexican restaurant in Niagara Falls where Pro Church HQ is located. Pro Church Tools HQ is located, named Frijoles. We all eat there basically every day. If you are a church, you should follow Frijoles on Twitter and Instagram. If you're a church in Niagara, you can also follow. You can usually get a directory of these online. All of the local businesses and organizations and restaurants. Follow those people because it's just great to know that, like, if you're in a community as a church, you're serving that community just like the restaurants are, just like the dentistries are, just like the doctors and the lawyers and the veterinarians. And so, you following them, if you're another restaurant, and this is so true, if you're a restaurant or a lawyer's office or a dentistry, they have like no followers either. They're just like your church. And so when you go and follow them, they're gonna see that and be, oh, this is great. It doesn't work like that on an individual level, but it does work like that on a professional level because they, as professional accounts, just like you, have the same problems. Like, I don't want to follow someone and seem like a creepy dentist that's stalking you from down the street. Right, so they can empathize and understand what it's like. So those are the three things that I would recommend to Andrew. Follow people that follow you, assuming that they're engaged with your church or seemingly possibly could be engaged with your church in some way. Follow local accounts that are professionals. And remember the third thing?
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was like aside from the first thing. So yeah, that's what I would say about following people.
All right, so the second question comes from Carter. Carter asks, when people in your congregation come to you with a "can you add this to the website" and it doesn't fit with the theme, brand, or overall strategy of the website, how do you respond? I'm trying desperately to keep our website from becoming an overpopulated newsfeed primarily used for church members. We need our website to primarily be for newcomers and people interested.
So this becomes a problem in churches when there isn't an actual set of criteria and guidelines in place that says this is what deems appropriate for hitting the website and this is what isn't appropriate. I like to think of it like when you go to a theme park and you want to go on the ride, maybe you're with your kid, or maybe when you were younger, and like there's the big ride at the theme park, it's like the Superman ride, and there's that sign right outside the queue before the line begins, and it's like, you must be this tall to ride. That roller coaster is saying, okay, if you want to be a part of this, this is the criteria that needs to be met. Namely, you can't be this short. Short people, unite.
Truth.
So same thing for your website. Have a set of criteria that you have deemed appropriate for what would allow something to be on the website. This will be especially helpful in two ways. Namely, it's going to help you figure out, first of all, preemptively, what deserves to be on the website and what doesn't. But secondly, and this cannot be overstated, it's so helpful when Sheila comes to you and Sheila goes, Roxanne, I need to have the women's ministry daily brunch. It's a daily brunch. That's how much this women's ministry loves brunch on the website, or I will withhold my giving. Wow, church politics. Wow. That's terrifying, Sheila. Don't be like Sheila. But if you have a set of criteria that don't change on a case-per-case basis, now you, who is this from again? Carter. Now, Carter, you don't have to be the bad guy, right? You don't have to be the person that's like deciding on a case-per-case basis and letting your bias come into play at all, because that's what you don't want. If you have someone come to you and you say, yes, your announcement, your event, your information, your page can go on the website, and then you say no to someone else, what's going to happen is people are going to begin internally within the church saying, okay, how did Carter make that decision? Why did he show preference to, Sheila and not to Dave? Again, all old names. No one I've ever met my age is named Sheila. So, but if you have a set of criteria, suddenly you, Carter, you're like, look, this is the rule. This is the set of criteria that we've determined makes something eligible for the website or not. It's not on me, it's just how it is. And that can give you consistency, and it allows you to kind of think through this before that awkward conversation happens. Because if you don't think through this now, Carter's bringing this up because he's had these conversations, he's likely found himself in this kind of awkward scenario. But if you're watching this, think through this now, because this conversation will happen eventually. And make sure you kind of know what you're going to say ahead of time, because then when it happens, you're ready to roll, no worries whatsoever. So that's my thoughts on that.
Right. So the third question is from Chad. Chad asks, I'm hoping someone at Pro Church Tools can help. I'm having some pushback for online giving. Administration does not like the idea of having processing fees. How are you all handling these fees, or at least explaining it to them?
In 10 years, the majority of the American workforce is going to be me and Roxanne. Not us, because we live in Canada, but millennials, our generation. Right now, we're not quite there yet. We're still a little bit less than a decade away. Right now, we're your student pastors, we are your worship pastors, in some case, we're your lead pastors, we're the young families in the church. Very, very soon, we are going to be the majority of the American workforce, the majority of the people in your region that you're going to be attempting to reach via your church. When was the last time you had cash on you?
I actually have cash on me right now, but it's like $5. I don't have like major amounts of cash on me.
I should have known that was going to happen. Here's a good example of this. So we moved into this new office space, new Pro Church Tools HQ, and for some reason, our landlord only accepts checks, which is obscene. They're an amazing landlord, and so we love them. And so what I did was I went into the bank, went through the painstaking process of ordering checks, and the checks arrived, and we were like, okay, we've got to fill out our rent checks for the year. And, well, Roxanne, what happened?
Well, first you Googled how to do it.
Yes, I went to
figure it out.
How to fill out a check.
And then you thought you filled it out wrong. So then you were like, oh, I screwed it up. And then
I did fill it out wrong.
So then it was filled out wrong. And then I had to fill out all of the checks.
Yeah, because I don't know how to fill out a check. And the last time I had cash, I avoid cash like the plague. Here's what happens if you give me cash. First, I try to tell you, do not give me this cash, do not give me this cash. If the cash is given to me, I go home, I hand my wife the cash and say, all right, just shop, because I don't want this. I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna buy like McDonald's with it. Like, this cash isn't gonna be helpful to me. And so, anyway, the point being is that we are moving more and more towards the direction of giving being done digitally and online primarily. We're not moving away from that. So, firstly, you've got to make your peace with the understanding that, sure, right now you may experience a tension in your church between the older generation and the younger generation. The older generation that loves the giving envelopes that you print out and they take them home and there's one numbered for each week and they fill it out faithfully, they drop it in the offering basket, and you're good to go. And then you've got the younger generation and maybe they give a little bit less. And so it feels like they're not as important. You don't really consider their giving habits as much as you would the older generation. But you got to recognize that that demographic is only going to be moving and becoming more and more prevalent in your church's congregation, while as the other one is diminishing. And so, firstly, you've got to be considerate of future-proofing and planning for the future. Churches are notoriously poor at this. They look at their current situation and they say, this is how things are now. Let's make some big decisions based on things as they are now. But in the world of technology and digital that we live in now, things are changing so rapidly, you've got to always be thinking about the future as well. Now, when it comes to the fees associated with digital and online giving, I understand that. It can suck when you're given $1,000 via a tithe and $32.50 is immediately taken away because of merchant fees. Now, why are those fees taken? Well, first of all, it is very, very important that you legally process credit card transactions. You can't just accept a credit card without it being secure. And so the online merchant that you're using, whether that be Stripe or a Square Reader or something else, they are charging that, one, because Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and Amex are charging a certain fee to use their card. And secondly, they're charging a little bit more, let's say like 0.5% on top of what the credit card companies are charging, because it costs them the infrastructure that they've built to make sure you're secure and covered and you're not gonna get in trouble in any way, and making sure you're not storing credit cards on a server that's unsecure. Like, there are a million different considerations. So that's what the fees are going towards. You know, there are so many great church giving companies, Tithely, Secure Give, PushPay, Planning Center Giving, that are doing their very best to make those fees as minimal as possible. But they need to exist, and the majority of that fee isn't even instituted by the payment gateway or the merchant, it's by the credit card companies. And then you have to consider this. Is online giving the only thing that has a fee associated with it? Well, no, not at all. If you're accepting physical giving, you've got someone who's got to count all of it. You've got someone who's got to make a run to the bank. And sure, that's not direct money going towards that. But if it's a staff member that's going towards, that's doing that, that's indirect money that's being spent on the hours and time that staff person is taking to do the accounting and do the running to the bank. And even if it's a volunteer, you've still got volunteer hours that could be spent elsewhere. And so you're losing time cost. And what about, what if you have a kiosk at your church? This is an online giving, but if you've got a debit or credit kiosk at your church, one of those machines have a rental fee normally associated. They're also taking a bit of transaction. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, yes, we're gonna pay anywhere between 2 and 3 and change % for each transaction we accept digitally and online. But without that, how much money are we not going to be able to accept at all? The amount, this may sound insane, but the amount of difficulty it's going to take me to go to the bank each Sunday morning, take out money. Who goes to the bank? Oh, the bank is the worst. I'm just going to be like, it's not worth it. I'll just give to Syrian refugees, or I'll give to charity water. I like my church, but nobody got time for that. Think about the amount of ease that you're gonna allow your church to give through with digital and online giving. Yeah, it's gonna cost a bit of money, but you're gonna get more giving that would never have existed before. Here's a very simple way of explaining it. Hey, Roxanne, I'm gonna give you $1. Is that okay?
Sure.
Roxanne's fine with that. Hey, Roxanne, I'm gonna give you $1, but you need to give me 3 cents back. Roxanne's not gonna be like, oh, I need to give 3 cents back of that $1 I never had before? Well, 97 cents ain't worth it.
Ripping me off.
And I understand where churches are coming from. We want to be good stewards of what we're given, right? And credit card fees can sometimes feel like a waste, like you're just taking money and throwing it away. But you have to see it as the cost of doing business, so to speak. You got to stay secure online. You can't be messing around with credit card stuff. Find a great payment provider who will charge you per transaction, maybe, so that you're only paying for what is being given. There are so many great giving providers, and you can use that as a metric to look at, like as a distinctive. Are you going to charge me per month, like let's say $100 per month to use your payment service, or are you only going to charge me 0.5% on top of the already credit card fee? And that way, you're only paying when giving is actually being done.
All right, so the last question that I have today is from Joshua.
Last question.
Joshua asks, hey Brady, so when doing video announcements, our church likes to announce events at least a month ahead of time. How would you recommend advertising an event every week? Should I use the same announcement story for each, or try to come up with a new story? I've gone through the video announcements masterclass and I'm still not sure.
Sweet. So Joshua is hitting on, firstly, what we call the church announcement formula, that being story plus a single call to action. When you're doing a promotion within your church, it's much better to share a story and inspire your congregation than just spout off all the boring details, time, place, cost. So that's kind of a little bit of context behind the question. What Joshua is asking is, if I have to promote the same event 4 weeks in a row, do I share the same story in all 4 weeks? Should I share it all 4 weeks at all? Now, firstly, let's talk about sharing the same announcement week after week after week. The average visitor to a church, the average family, is going to church once every other Sunday. So, at the very least, when you're presenting an announcement at church, it's not unrealistic. In fact, it's probably likely to know that, okay, only half of our church is going to hear this announcement. So if in a perfect world, if you presented that announcement on consecutive Sundays, on consecutive weekends, everyone would get to hear that once. So it's definitely okay, and in fact encouraged, to say the same announcement on multiple occasions, because people just aren't really listening. They might not be there, they're traveling, and even if you are following the church announcement formula and executing on your announcements in a great way, it still might not be heard physically by that many people. Second thing to consider is, I always use this worship analogy. If you've ever led worship at your church, you know that by the time you are incredibly bored of a song, by the time you've heard Oceans a billion times and you're like, if I have to hear Oceans and that stupid drum solo one more time, I'm never going to swim again. By the time you're at that point, the people in your church are like, oh, I know the first word of the chorus now. Oh, I can kind of hum along with this. When you're bored of something and you think it's been really overdone, your church is like, oh, I'm just starting to get on board with this. So you have to kind of get out of your own mind and see it from your church's perspective and be like, okay, it feels like I've been saying this a ton, but that is what's needed. One, because people aren't here all the time, and two, because that's just how long it takes people to hear something when they're not saying it. You know, they always say the best way to learn material is to teach it. That's because when you are communicating something, it seems so clear to you. The answers I'm giving to these questions right now, they seem so clear, but they might not seem that clear to you, and you got to reiterate the same thing over and over again. So it is okay. I do encourage you, announce the same things on multiple occasions. Now, when it comes to the story, what I would do is I usually have a base story, and then I share like different angles of it. So for instance, last time I shared about baptism in our church, I told my story of being baptized. I talked about how I was baptized in my pastor's backyard, in his in-ground pool. Indoor pool, that would have been sweet. In-ground pool, because our church was this little tiny chapel. We didn't have a baptismal tank or anything like that. And so that could be week one. Week two, I'm not going to share a brand new baptism story. What I'm going to do is I'll share that again, and I'll talk about how afterwards I went out to lunch with my grandma and grandpa. You know, they don't really go to church, but they were there with me as a 9-year-old, and it was awesome. That's week two. Week three, I talk about how, you know, it was so cool because everyone else that was like my age in the church, and there was like 5 of us that were like, you know, preteens, we all got baptized the same day, and that was really cool. The pastor actually got to baptize like 2 of his daughters, you know. And then week 4, I do like another just little angle of the story. Same story, different acts within that same story. And so that's one way to take it. You could go and create new stories for each one, but the problem with that is that it just becomes a lot of extra work on your part. You could also use the exact same story 2 weeks in a row, but I wouldn't go beyond that.
Right.
Okay, great. 4 questions down, and thus ends the very first episode of Ask Brady. Thanks for watching. If you want your question answered, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, just leave a comment below with the hashtag AskBrady, and you'll be in contention. Of course, you can also ask on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag AskBrady. My question for you, Pro Church Nation, is this. When it comes to following people on social media, what kind of strategy, if any, does your church use? Do you follow everyone that follows you? Do you follow people preemptively? Do you follow no one because you are a cool church? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching the very first edition of Ask Brady. We're going to be we'll try to publish a brand new one every single Friday. So we'll see you next week. This is Brady and Roxanne signing off for now.